Welcome to History's Dark Mirror. In today's video, we are going to uncover the secrets that the Earth has been hiding for thousands, even millions of years. Imagine standing at the edge of an excavation pit, dust rising in the heat, and the faint smell of ancient soil filling the air. A brush sweeps away sand, and suddenly, what was lost is found. 2025 has been a year unlike any other. A year where the ground itself seems restless, pushing relics of the past into our hands, forcing us to look, to remember, to wonder. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be taken on a journey across deserts, jungles, mountains, and forgotten cities as we explore the newest, strangest, and most haunting archaeological discoveries of our time. We will walk through tombs that have not been opened in thousands of years, touch tools and weapons made by hands that have long turned to dust, and even smell the scents of a world that existed before history was written. Some of these discoveries illuminate the brilliance of ancient civilizations, while others reveal the darker sides of humanity, slavery, war, forgotten cults, and lost bloodlines. Each one is a fragment of a larger, stranger puzzle, reminding us that history is not done with us yet. From the sands of Saqqara to the mountains of Guatemala, from the jungles of Peru to the deserts of Jordan, we are about to stitch together a map of the past so detailed that it will change how you see the present. And as always, every answer we find seems to leave us with new questions. Who built this? Why here? And why now? Are these discoveries simply coincidence, or are we meant to find them right at this moment, as if the past itself is speaking to us? Let's open the first door. Our journey begins under the blazing Egyptian sun, where the sands of Saqqara have hidden a tomb that defies our expectations. It belonged to Tetin Bafu, a man described in hieroglyphs as a healer, a priest, and something even more unusual, a kind of wizard doctor. The French-Swiss team that uncovered his final resting place found themselves stepping into a chamber that felt more like a shrine than a grave. The air was heavy with silence, yet everywhere there were clues of a life devoted to mending the sick and invoking the divine. Painted on the walls were images of healing rituals, prayers for protection, and spells to ward off illness. Laid carefully beside the body were copper scalpels that still gleamed, stone jars containing traces of resin and herbal mixtures, and small figurines meant to call upon the gods. Some researchers believe Tetin Befu was part of a highly secretive circle of healers who combined medicine and magic, perhaps the precursors to physicians as we know them today. Others suggest his tomb is evidence that medicine was not merely practical in ancient Egypt, but deeply spiritual, tied to cosmic order and divine favor. Standing in that chamber, one could almost hear the echo of chants, smell the faint trace of incense burned thousands of years ago, and wonder about the illnesses he treated, the kings or commoners who may have trusted him with their lives. The discovery forces us to ask, what cures were known back then, now lost to time? And if Tetin Befu was seen as powerful enough to be buried with such honor, what kind of knowledge or danger did he possess? The tomb is both a treasure chest and a riddle, and as archaeologists carefully document every object, the story of this man slowly rises from the sand, like a patient finally waking after a long sleep. But Saqqara was only the beginning of 2025's revelations. As January continued, another discovery was taking shape thousands of miles away, not in the desert, but deep in the lush jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, where LiDAR mapping was about to reveal the hidden heartbeat of a long-forgotten Mayan city. Imagine the humid air of the jungle, thick with the calls of unseen birds and the distant hiss of insects. Beneath this green ocean of trees lies Ecbatana, a Mayan city that for centuries had been swallowed by nature. Now, with the help of cutting-edge LiDAR scanning, its layout has been revealed in extraordinary detail. Researchers from Mexico's Instituto Nacional de Antropología y Historia mapped the city's core area, exposing roads, plazas, residential compounds, and ceremonial platforms long hidden under vines and roots. The image that emerged was one of a thriving urban center, carefully planned and engineered, showing that the Maya who lived here were not merely surviving in the jungle, they were shaping it to their design. As the data came in, archaeologists realized that the city's roads aligned with celestial events, suggesting that Ecbatana was not just a place to live, but a place to worship, to mark time, and to connect with the divine. The silence of the jungle was suddenly heavy with the ghosts of processions that once passed down those streets. Drums beating, torches burning, voices chanting prayers to the gods of rain and maize. Some researchers believe Ecbatana may have been part of a wider network of sites, connected through trade and ritual. Its rediscovery helping to fill in blank spaces on the map of Mayan civilization. Others suggest it may hold clues about why so many Maya cities were eventually abandoned, pointing to patterns of drought, warfare, or social collapse etched into its ruins. For now, the city waits, mapped but not yet fully excavated, a riddle of stone and earth promising answers to questions about one of the world's most enigmatic civilizations. As we leave the steaming jungle behind, our next stop takes us to Italy, where the ancient city of Pompeii has once again surprised the world with a discovery that speaks not of death, but of life and leisure. Pompeii is a city frozen in time, its tragedy preserved in ash since that day in 79 AD when Vesuvius erupted. But beneath the shadow of that disaster, archaeologists continue to find evidence of how vibrantly its people once lived. In January, the director of the Pompeii Archaeological Park announced the discovery of a massive thermal complex, an ancient bathhouse system that was more than just a place to wash. Walking through the newly excavated structure feels like stepping into a Roman spa day. You can beneath the streets of modern London, where cars rumble and glass towers scrape the sky, lies another city, Londinium, the Roman settlement that was once the empire's stronghold on this island. In February, the Museum of London Archaeology revealed something astonishing: the remains of what is believed to be the very first Roman basilica ever built in the city. Imagine descending into the earth and standing in the footprint of a hall that once echoed with the voices of magistrates, merchants, and petitioners. Basilicas were not churches in those days. They were centers of administration, law, and commerce. Places where decisions were made that could change the fate of an entire province. The excavation revealed stone foundations outlining a vast rectangular space, flanked by colonnades that once held up a soaring roof. The scale alone suggests the building was a statement, Rome saying, "We are here to stay." Some researchers suggest this basilica may have been built in the early decades after the Roman conquest, making it one of the earliest symbols of imperial authority in Britain. Others see it as evidence of how quickly Londinium rose from a frontier outpost to a thriving urban hub. Standing in that space, with the roar of 21st century London faintly above, one can almost hear the clatter of hobnailed sandals, the murmur of Latin voices, the distant sound of a judge's staff striking wood to call for order. It is a reminder that London's story is layered, each generation building on the ruins of the last. and that the city we know is haunted by a city we cannot see until discoveries like this bring it back to life. And just as London gave us a voice from its deep past, Egypt soon offered us something even more intimate, a scent, a smell carried across 5,000 years that lets us step closer to the dead than ever before. For centuries, we have stared at mummies through glass cases, studying their wrappings, their amulets, their golden masks, but never their smell. That changed when a team of scientists published a groundbreaking study in the Journal of the American Chemical Society this February, analyzing the volatile organic compounds that still cling to Egyptian mummies after 5,000 years. And the result shocked everyone. They smell nice. Using sophisticated chemical profiling, researchers recreated the scent of resins, bombs, and oils used during the embalming process. And what they found was a surprisingly pleasant aroma, warm, resinous, slightly sweet, like pine and honey mixed with incense smoke. It is a strange thought that the ancient Egyptians not only preserved their dead, but also perfumed them, ensuring that their journey into the afterlife was accompanied by a smell fit for the gods. Some scholars believe this was not merely ritual, but also symbolic. That scent was seen as a way to purify, to attract divine favor, to make the deceased pleasing to Osiris and the other gods who would judge them. Others suggest it was part of a more practical understanding of preservation, slowing decay and masking odors in the tomb. But now, thanks to science, we can stand in a lab and smell what priests and mourners smelled as they wrapped their dead. A sensory bridge across millennia. The finding raises new questions. If we can reconstruct smells, can we reconstruct entire ritual experiences, from sound to touch to taste? Are we on the brink of recreating not just what ancient life looked like, but what it felt like? These are questions that keep archaeologists and chemists awake at night, and, as they ponder them, Egypt revealed yet another marvel. The tomb of a pharaoh thought lost forever, discovered for the first time since February brought. A discovery so monumental that it echoed the sensation of Howard Carter's find over a century ago. Archaeologists announced they had uncovered the tomb of Pharaoh Thutmose II, the first royal tomb to be discovered in Egypt since Tutankhamun's nearly 100 years earlier. Imagine stepping into a burial chamber untouched for over 3,000 years, the air inside stale, heavy, almost sacred. Thutmose II was a ruler of Egypt's 18th dynasty, a man whose short just when we thought Pompeii had surrendered all its secrets, February gave us a discovery that feels more like a revelation. A massive frieze uncovered at the house of Thyasis, depicting the rites of the Dionysian mysteries. Step inside that villa and you are greeted by a wall that seems to pulse with life. Painted figures of satyrs and maenads whirl in ecstatic motion. Dionysus himself presides over the scene, crowned with ivy, while flutes and drums seem to echo through the silent room. The colors are still vivid, reds and blacks and golds glowing as though painted yesterday, not nearly 2,000 years ago. Some researchers believe this frieze was part of a private ritual space, a room where wealthy Romans gathered to initiate themselves into the cult of Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and rebirth. Others suggest it may have been more symbolic, a decorative display meant to honor the god and invite his blessings upon the household. But whatever its purpose, standing before it feels like intruding on a secret, a moment frozen at the height of ceremony when worshippers would drink, dance, and shed the boundaries of the ordinary world. The discovery forces us to imagine the human side of Pompeii, not just as victims of a catastrophe, but as participants in mysteries that promised transcendence. These painted figures become voices from the past, whispering of a religion that sought to dissolve the line between mortal and divine. And as archaeologists carefully photograph and conserve the frieze, they are reminded that each brushstroke is both fragile and eternal, a window into the minds of people who lived, loved, feared, and prayed before the ash fell. The house of Thyasis now stands as one of the most evocative sights in Pompeii, and its frieze leaves us with a question that lingers. Were the rites of Dionysus a comfort to the people of Pompeii, or a dangerous invitation to chaos and frenzy in a city already perched on the edge of doom? March began with a discovery that pushes the story of humanity back by hundreds of thousands of years. In Tanzania, a study published in Nature revealed the oldest human-crafted bone tools ever found, dating back 1.5 million years. Think about that number for a moment. These tools were made long before Homo sapiens walked the earth, likely by our distant ancestors, perhaps Homo erectus. The tools are simple but deliberate, carefully shaped fragments of animal bone, sharpened to cut, scrape, or dig. Holding one, archaeologists say, is like shaking hands with someone from a time so remote it defies comprehension. These tools show evidence of intentional flaking and wear marks consistent with butchery, meaning that our ancestors were already experimenting with ways to transform the world around them, to turn raw material into instruments of survival. Some researchers argue that this find changes the timeline of human innovation, suggesting that technological thinking began earlier than we believed. Others caution that these tools may have been part of a localized tradition rather than a widespread revolution. Still, the implications are staggering. It means that the capacity for invention, for foresight, for altering nature with thought and skill, was present in our lineage long before we thought it was. Imagine the sound of those bones cracking, the sparks of understanding in a mind still forming the concept of tool. This discovery is not just about bones, it is about the birth of human intention. The moment we began to separate ourselves from the animals around us, and from this primordial African plain, we travel north to a cave in Spain, where another discovery waits, one that stares back at us, quite literally, across more than 1 million years, deep within the Cima del Elefante cave in northern Spain. Archaeologists have found something hauntingly personal, part of a human face, belonging to someone who lived between 1.1 and 1.4 million years ago. It is the oldest human facial fragment ever discovered in Europe, and holding it is like looking into a mirror that reflects not just a face, but the beginning of our story on this continent. The fragment consists of a piece of jaw and teeth, yet even this small remnant speaks for March did not let go of its revelations so easily. Deep in the heart of Egypt, at the site of Goza, archaeologists made a grim discovery. Iron shackles, twisted and rusted with time, but unmistakable in their purpose. They were found in an area believed to have been a labor settlement, where workers who built monumental tombs and temples once lived and died. At first, there was silence at the dig site. Everyone understood what they were looking at: physical proof of bondage, of forced labor, of human suffering buried beneath centuries of sand. These were not ceremonial items, not symbolic. They were tools of control, worn by real people who sweated, bled, and possibly died under their weight. Some of the shackles were small, perhaps for ankles, perhaps for children, a detail that has left researchers haunted. Others were heavy enough to restrain multiple individuals at once, a chilling testament to the scale of coercion. The discovery reopens the debate about how Egypt's monumental architecture was built. Were these shackles used on prisoners of war, criminals, or common laborers conscripted against their will? Were they a symbol of punishment, or the instruments of a system designed to keep the workforce in line? The desert wind blows softly over Goza now, but once it must have carried the sound of hammers striking stone, overseers shouting commands, and the rattling of these iron restraints. This is history at its most unflinching, a reminder that behind the glory of temples and tombs lies the human cost of empire. The shackles of Goza are not just artifacts, they are accusations, whispering of lives spent in service to gods and kings who will never thank them. And as if Egypt was not done speaking, April arrived with a discovery at Abydos, the tomb of a lost dynasty, with astraca that may rewrite the story of Egypt's forgotten rulers. Abydos, the city of the dead, a place that has yielded pharaohs, temples, and entire forgotten chapters of Egyptian history. And now, 2025 has given us something extraordinary, a tomb from the obscure Abydos dynasty, long a mystery to historians. The tomb itself is modest, but filled with clues, pottery, funerary figurines, and most intriguingly, dozens of astraca, shards of pottery and limestone covered with ink inscriptions. These astraca are like letters from the past, recording names, titles, and possibly even tax records or temple offerings. What makes this discovery so groundbreaking is that the Abydos dynasty has always been something of a shadow in Egyptian history, existing during a chaotic period when Egypt was fragmented and rival dynasties ruled simultaneously. Scholars argue that these astraca may contain the names of kings we never knew existed, or confirm disputed reigns that until now have only been hinted at in fragmentary sources. The air inside the tomb is thick and stale, and each artifact is lifted with gloved hands, photographed and logged. One ostracon shows a crude drawing of a royal figure with a double crown, suggesting that whoever was buried here claimed full kingship, not merely local authority. Another records a list of offerings: grain, cattle, honey, a snapshot of economic life during this turbulent era. Piece by piece, the story comes together. A local ruler trying to assert control, to maintain order in a time when Egypt threatened to unravel. The tomb of Abydos dynasty reminds us that history is not written by the victors alone. Sometimes it is written on the back of a broken piece of pottery, waiting for us to find it. And while Egypt was revealing its lost kings, Britain was busy coughing up a treasure of its own, a hoard of silver that had been lying quietly in the soil since the days of the Vikings. April's most dazzling discovery came from a quiet village in North Yorkshire, Melsonby, where a metal detectorist uncovered what has been called one of the most significant Viking hoards in decades. Beneath a shallow layer of earth lay a collection of over 200 silver coins, ingots, and jewelry, dating back to the late 9th and early 10th centuries. Imagine the excitement of brushing dirt from a coin that had last seen the light of day more than 1,000 years ago. The hoard contains coins from multiple kingdoms: Anglo-Saxon, Viking, even some from distant lands, evidence of trade, plunder, and the complex political landscape of early May brought us a discovery that redefines what it means to be human, and it happened on the arid plains of Kenya, where archaeologists uncovered evidence of what they are calling the world's oldest ceremonial feast. This was not just eating. For survival, this was ritual, this was gathering, this was memory made into action. The site, dated to roughly 12,000 years ago, revealed fire pits, animal bones carefully arranged, and grinding stones still marked with the residue of plants used for food preparation. But the most striking find was the diversity of the remains: antelope, fish, even exotic birds, not native to the area, suggesting that groups traveled from far away to attend this gathering. This was a planned event, one that may have lasted days, perhaps even weeks. Researchers believe it could represent one of the earliest examples of a community coming together to share food, not out of necessity, but out of social or spiritual purpose. Imagine the scene: fires crackling against the dark night, the air heavy with smoke and roasting meat, voices rising in chants or songs we will never hear again. This was a moment when hunter-gatherers became something more, when food became symbol, when sharing a meal became an act that bound people together in a way that shaped the future of civilization. Some scholars argue that feasting like this could have been the catalyst for more permanent settlements, sparking the shift toward agriculture and the birth of culture itself. Others wonder if this feast marked a burial or a rite of passage, a way to honor the dead or invoke the spirits. Whatever the reason, this discovery forces us to see our ancestors not as desperate survivors, but as creators of meaning, capable of joy, ceremony, and connection. And as we leave the Kenyan plains behind, our next stop takes us to the Mississippi River Valley, where ground-penetrating radar has just revealed that Cahokia, one of North America's great ancient cities, was far larger and more complex than we ever imagined for decades. Cahokia has been known as the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico, a place of massive earthen mounds, wooden palisades, and a society sophisticated enough to rival the cities of Europe in its time. But May 2025 shattered our understanding of Cahokia yet again. Using advanced LiDAR and magnetometry, archaeologists mapped areas beyond the central ceremonial core and discovered sprawling suburbs stretching miles in every direction. What they found were hundreds of house platforms, storage pits, roads, and even evidence of market plazas, suggesting that Cahokia was not just a city, but a metropolis that may have housed over 40,000 people at its peak. This would make it the largest city in what is now the United States until the late 18th century. The findings suggest a level of organization, governance, and engineering that rivals contemporary civilizations across the Atlantic. The suburbs reveal evidence of craft specialization, areas where stone tools were manufactured, where pottery was fired, and where food was processed for mass consumption. They also hint at a social hierarchy, with larger houses located closer to the city center and smaller dwellings further out. Some researchers even speculate that Cahokia's influence may have stretched hundreds of miles, drawing people from across the Mississippi Valley into its orbit. But this discovery also raises haunting questions. What happened to this city? By the 14th century, Cahokia was abandoned, its great mounds left to the wind and the weeds. Was it climate change, warfare, disease, or something more mysterious that caused its fall? Standing on the grassy mounds today, it is almost impossible to imagine the sound of tens of thousands of people living, working, praying, and feasting here. Yet beneath the soil, their city still breathes, still speaks, and thanks to these new scans, we can finally hear it more clearly than ever. And from the grasslands of Illinois, we travel now to Mexico. In June, the island of Crete gave us a story that feels torn from a myth, a discovery that seems to whisper of Minos, of labyrinths, of forgotten rites. Deep beneath the ruins of the Palace of Knossos, archaeologists uncovered a small, sealed room that had lain hidden for over 3,000 years. The chamber, accessed when a section of floor collapsed during routine conservation work, contained a remarkable set of artifacts. Dozens of ceramic vessels, some filled with dried residues of wine and oil, bronze blades ritually bent out of shape, and a single bull figurine, its horns still sharp, placed at the very center of the room. The walls bore faint traces of red and black paint, suggesting that this chamber had once glowed with color under flickering torchlight. Some researchers believe this room may have been used for ritual offerings to the gods, perhaps even to Poseidon, the earth shaker himself. The position of the bull figurine has led others to speculate that this was part of the infamous bull cult of Minoan religion, a site where sacrifices may have been performed in secret, away from the grand ceremonial courts above. And yet, there is something unsettling about the way the chamber was sealed. It does not seem to have been abandoned in haste. Instead, the objects were carefully arranged, the entrance deliberately blocked, as though someone wanted this place, and whatever it represented, to stay buried forever. Was this an act of reverence or of fear? Did the priests of Knossos entomb their own sacred past, perhaps during a moment of crisis or invasion? Standing in the silent chamber today, you can almost feel the presence of those who knelt here, offering wine, oil, and blood to forces they could not see but dared not ignore. And from this sealed room of shadows, we travel north to the windswept highlands of Scotland, where a single stone has been pulled from the soil, a stone carved with symbols that no one can yet read. July brought a rare discovery in the heart of Aberdeenshire, Scotland, a newly unearthed Pictish stone, carved with symbols that defy translation and ignite speculation. Found while ploughing a field, the stone had lain face down for centuries, its carvings preserved in extraordinary detail. At first glance, it shows the familiar repertoire of Pictish iconography: crescent and virod, double disc, zerod, but closer inspection reveals a pattern never seen before, a spiraling sequence of small dots and lines, almost like a proto-writing system. Some researchers suggest it could represent a calendar, tracking lunar cycles or seasonal events. Others believe it might be a genealogical record, encoding the names or deeds of a royal lineage. And there are those who whisper about something stranger, that the stone could be a message meant not for humans, but for the gods, or for those who would one day find it. The surface of the stone shows signs of deliberate polishing, as though it were meant to catch the light of dawn or dusk, revealing its carvings only at specific times of day. Imagine a lone figure standing on the windswept hill, placing this stone upright, watching as the sun's first rays strike its face and bring the symbols to life. Was this a warning, a marker of territory, or a key to understanding a lost language that once bound a people together? What makes the find even more intriguing is that ground-penetrating radar has detected other anomalies nearby, suggesting there may be more stones yet to be uncovered, perhaps even forming a... Few discoveries have the power to make the world stop and look back in awe. But February 2025 gave us one such moment. For the first time since Howard Carter pried open the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, archaeologists have uncovered a royal burial from ancient Egypt, the long-lost tomb of Pharaoh Thutmose II, hidden in the cliffs near Luxor. Its entrance was so well concealed that it eluded explorers for more than 3 millennia. When the archaeologists descended into the burial chamber, they were met with a sight that defies description. Walls covered in brilliant paintings of the pharaoh's divine birth, his battles, and his coronation. The sarcophagus, carved from quartzite, lay at the center, its lid sealed since antiquity. But the most startling find was the array of funerary goods: golden bracelets still clasped, alabaster jars filled with unguents, and a set of ceremonial daggers that seemed to glint with an almost menacing beauty. What makes this tomb particularly fascinating is the insight it offers into a pharaoh often overshadowed by his more famous wife, Hatshepsut, and stepson, Thutmose III. Some scholars believe the art inside the tomb may rewrite his legacy, portraying him not as a weak king but as a ruler with his own quiet power, whose reign may have been cut short by intrigue. As excavations continue, researchers hope to find clues about his cause of death, whether natural, accidental, or perhaps something darker. Standing inside that chamber, with the painted gods staring down and the air heavy with incense residues from a burial 3,500 years ago, one cannot help but feel the weight of time, the presence of a king who has waited patiently to be remembered. And from the golden sands of Luxor, our journey now takes us to the ash-covered ruins of Pompeii, where a wall painting has come to light that seems to whisper of wine, ritual, and ecstatic dance. Pompeii has always been a place where life and death seem to mingle, where laughter and terror are frozen together in ash, and in February 2025, that city gave us yet another secret. In the house of Thyasus, a large frieze was discovered that may be the most vivid depiction of the Dionysian mysteries ever found. Stretching across the walls of a triclinium or dining room, the painting shows a procession of figures, playing flutes, maenads in frenzied dance, and the god Dionysus himself reclining, crowned with ivy, cup in hand. The colors are remarkably preserved, the reds and blues still glowing as if the plaster were painted yesterday. Some scholars suggest this was not merely decoration, but an invitation, a space where initiates may have gathered to reenact the secret rites of Dionysus, seeking to dissolve the boundary between human and divine through wine, music, and ritual. Ecstasy. Others argue it may have been a private display of elite culture, meant to impress guests with its sophistication. What is undeniable is the atmosphere of the room. To stand there is to feel as though one is on the edge of something dangerous, something forbidden, as if the air still vibrates with drum beats and laughter. The discovery of this frieze also raises questions about the spiritual life of Pompeii's citizens, how many of them participated in these cults, what they sought from them, and how such practices were viewed by Roman authority. As the fresco is carefully conserved, it gives us a rare window into the intoxicating blend of religion, art, and pleasure that defined Pompeii before its destruction. And from the shadowed dining room of Pompeii, we turn now to the rugged hills of Catalonia, where the soil has given up the bones of a city that once stood at the crossroads of war. In April, Spanish archaeologists announced that the remains discovered in Walls, Catalonia, are in fact deep in the Damjili cave of Azerbaijan, where shadows cling to the walls and silence reigns like an ancient king. Archaeologists have uncovered a small but astonishing object, a human-like figurine dating back nearly 5,000 years. At first glance, it appears simple, a carved stone figure with a round head, stylized arms, and a body that tapers like a flame. But to hold it in one's hand is to hold a mystery older than writing itself. Who carved this object, and why? Was it a god, a fertility idol, or a guardian spirit meant to protect those who sheltered in the cave? The site itself offers clues. The figurine was found near traces of hearths, shards of pottery, and animal bones, suggesting this was not just a place to hide from storms, but a center of ritual activity. The cave's walls are stained with mineral deposits that glint in torchlight, creating an otherworldly glow. and some researchers believe the figurine may have been placed here to commune with whatever spirits were believed to dwell within the earth. The craftsmanship is precise, almost reverent, as if its maker feared or worshipped the being it represents. The figurine's blank face is the most haunting feature, a featureless mask that seems to look at you and through you at the same time. A reminder that whoever carved it lived in a world of unseen powers where survival depended on appeasing forces, both natural and supernatural. For modern science, it is a clue to the development of religion, of human imagination itself. For the rest of us, it is an object that makes the hair rise on the back of the neck, proof that our ancestors were not merely hunters and gatherers, but dreamers, believers, and perhaps even magicians. And from this small carved idol, our story moves to an island where a sanctuary of marble and sun still remembers the prayers of those who came to worship Apollo on the southern coast of Cyprus, in a place where the sea glitters like molten glass, and the wind carries the scent of salt and thyme. Archaeologists have rediscovered the sanctuary of Apollo at Amathus, a holy site that once drew pilgrims from across the Mediterranean. What makes this find so extraordinary is not just the columns and altars that have been unearthed, but the evidence of a long continuity of worship stretching from the late Bronze Age through the Hellenistic and Roman periods. This was not a mere temple, but a complex where ritual processions were held, sacrifices offered, and oracles consulted. The newly uncovered section of the sanctuary contains votive offerings, terracotta figurines, carved dedications, and even inscriptions, invoking Apollo as a healer and protector of sailors. One inscription in particular has electrified scholars, a prayer for safe passage across the sea that mentions a specific date, tying this site to maritime trade networks that connected Cyprus to Greece, Egypt, and the Near East. Standing among the stones, one can imagine the rituals that once took place here. Priests in white robes, lyres and flutes playing as smoke curled upward to the sky. But the site also bears scars of destruction, perhaps from earthquakes or Christian iconoclasm, when pagan temples were torn down. This duality, devotion and desecration, gives the sanctuary a strange power, as if Apollo himself still lingers in the stones, demanding remembrance. For those who visit, it is a place where myth and history merge, where the old gods are not entirely gone but whisper in the sea breeze. And from the sunlit sanctuaries of Cyprus, our journey now plunges into a much darker place, a mass burial site in Germany, where the bones of in the endless deserts of northern Arabia, where the wind scours the stones and silence reigns beneath a sun that feels as old as the earth. Archaeologists have found a series of inscriptions carved into the black basalt rock. These are no random scratches, they are texts, written in an ancient script older than classical Arabic, perhaps even older than the Nabatean alphabet used in Petra. The inscriptions speak of alliances, of oaths, of gods whose names are now almost forgotten. Some are accompanied by drawings, camels with flaring nostrils, warriors with raised spears, and strange geometric symbols that hint at an unbroken tradition of desert spirituality. For historians, this find is electrifying because it gives voice to the nomads who roamed these lands long before the rise of Islam. People who have often been reduced to shadows in the historical record. Linguists are racing to decode the texts, to understand the grammar and syntax of a language that has been silent for centuries. Some early translations suggest references to star positions, rain-making rituals, and possibly even trade routes that link the Arabian Peninsula to Mesopotamia and the Levant. To stand before these stones is to feel as though you have stumbled into a conversation still echoing after 2,000 years. A dialogue between man and desert, between life and the harsh forces that tried to extinguish it. The letters are carved with such precision as though each stroke carried the weight of an oath, the edge of survival. What did these people fear, and what did they hope for? Were these prayers for rain, for victory in battle, for safe passage through hostile territory? The desert keeps its secrets, but these inscriptions are a crack in its armor, a glimpse of a time when the stars were gods and every dune might conceal danger. And from the burning sands of Arabia, our journey now turns to the waters of the Nile, where a fortress hidden beneath the river has been rediscovered after thousands of years, in the deep waters near the fourth cataract of the Nile, where the current surges with ancient strength. Archaeologists working with divers and sonar have found the submerged remains of a massive Nubian fortress. This was not a mere outpost, it was a bastion with thick mud brick walls, bastions at the corners, and storerooms large enough to feed an army. Radiocarbon dating suggests the fortress was built during the Kushite period, when the kingdom of Kush ruled vast stretches of the Nile Valley and stood as both rival and trading partner to Egypt. The fact that it now lies underwater is a mystery. Was it abandoned when the river changed course, or was it deliberately flooded as an act of war? Divers have found pottery, arrowheads, and even the remains of hearths still full of charcoal, frozen in time as if the garrison left in a hurry. What makes this discovery chilling is its strategic placement. Whoever controlled this fortress controlled the flow of goods and armies along the Nile. Some believe it may have been part of a network of fortifications that resisted Egyptian expansion, a last stand of Nubian independence before the pharaohs marched south. To descend into the fortress is to step back into an age when river and empire were one, when control of the Nile meant control of life itself. The water muffles all sound, turning the experience into a silent dream, but the walls tell a story of vigilance, of warriors who stood watch until the river claimed their post. It is a haunting reminder that history is not only buried in sand, but sometimes drowned, waiting for us to raise it back into the light. And from the river's depths, we now climb into the hills of Thrace, where a burial mound has yielded in a peat bog on the west coast of Ireland, where the mist clings low to the earth and the wind carries the tang of the sea. A team of archaeologists has uncovered a body so well preserved it seems almost asleep. The man, believed to have died over 2,500 years ago, still had skin stretched over bone, hair clinging to his scalp, and even fingerprints visible under careful examination. But what makes this discovery harrowing is not just his preservation, it is the manner of his death. He was bound before being killed, his skull showing evidence of a crushing blow, his throat slit with precision. This was not murder in the modern sense, it was ritual killing, a sacrifice meant to appease gods or secure the favor of the otherworld. Analysis of his stomach contents reveals a final meal of barley and buttermilk, perhaps a ceremonial Last Supper. Around his neck was a twisted band of bronze, a torque, a sign of high status, suggesting this was no common man but perhaps a king, or someone chosen to represent the king in a sacred offering. Such killings were believed to renew the land, to ensure fertility and prosperity, but they also reveal a society willing to shed blood in exchange for divine favor. Standing by the bog, watching the body lifted from the earth, one cannot escape the sense that this man has returned to remind us of the cost of power, of the ancient covenant between human ambition and the hunger of the gods. His face, peaceful, yet marked by violence, seems to ask whether we, too, would pay such a price if it promised salvation. And as the mists curl over the bog once more, we are left with the haunting knowledge that this was just one man among many, that the bog may still hold others, sleeping in the wet dark, waiting to rise again into the light of history. From this final grave, we come to the end of our journey, where all the discoveries we have witnessed converge into a single reflection. We have traveled across deserts and rivers, through tombs, sanctuaries, battlefields, and graves, and in each place, the earth has given us back a piece of its memory. The tomb of Thutmose II reminded us that kings can wait thousands of years to be remembered. The frieze of Dionysus whispered that ecstasy and mystery have always tempted mankind. The lost city of Sissa showed us that war leaves scars that never fade, and the horse cemetery of Baden-Württemberg proved that sacrifice is as old as civilization. From the figurine of Damgili to the chariot of Thrace, from the fortress under the Nile to the bog body in Ireland, each discovery has pulled back the veil that time has drawn across the past. What we have seen is not just history, but the dark mirror of humanity itself, our fears, our rituals, our need to speak to the dead and demand meaning from the universe. And yet there is something strangely comforting in these finds. They remind us that we are part of a story much older and larger than ourselves. A story written in stone, in bone, in the silent language of the earth. These artifacts do not simply teach us what happened. They force us to ask why. Why we built temples and killed kings. Why we buried horses in rows. Why we carved prayers into desert rock. Perhaps the answer is that we have always known, deep down, that life is fragile, and time is relentless, and that our only hope of resisting oblivion is to leave something behind that will outlast us. The discoveries of 2025 show that even in death, even in silence, the past still speaks, and when we listen, we hear not just the voices of the ancient world, but the echo of our own. So, as we close this journey, remember that history is not merely what has been, it is what is still becoming, what is still waiting to be found. The earth is full of secrets, and somewhere beneath our feet, another tomb, another inscription, another forgotten king may already be stirring, waiting for the day when we will once again open the door and step into the darkness of history's mirror.